We've had off and on over the years, we've had a number of people always asking about why is it necessary to study with a teacher. And everyone who studies with teachers, I'm sure their experiences are all different. And so these experiences that I'm talking about were with Suzuki Roshi, with Kojun Chiba Sensei, who was our primary teacher in Japan for like 23 years, and with Hakuo Kano Sensei also, who was a teacher for many years with us. And so my experiences are, I'm giving my thoughts on them, and whatever other people's experiences with teachers are, they could be different or the same or, very different. So I want to just give some of my experiences with it. I've noticed, among other things, how much Americans love their self-help books. And we like to learn things at our own pace all the time. And we can find books on how to cook, how to make houses, how to sew clothing, how to do spiritual studies, even how to enlighten ourselves. We can find a self-help book about all of that. But it seems like we feel like we can do just about anything if we want to. And we need a good book for it. And so self-help books are really popular now on every bookstore you go to. The problem with this, I think, is that the name itself, self-help, is the problem with the books. They only go so far. And when we begin meditation, we begin to study exactly what does the self mean. And the study can last for up to 5 to 10 years. And before we even understand what self means. Because for most of us, identity and self are literally inseparable. And self-help books may or may not help our study because we don't even understand what self is. After some understanding from sitting what self means, then the real work of meditation begins from that point on. Not only does it now involve the cushion and the zendo, it also extends to all of our life, our ordinary life, everywhere. And now work on ourself begins to take place in the dark. And self-help books only obscure understanding of what is actually happening. It's like being a child when you study the self. You have parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers and sisters. They're all there to help. And sometimes they muddy the water with us. But from babyhood to youngness in studying the self, you are assisted by the Sangha, by the teachers, by books and practice of many other people. And you are encouraged to continue because of these helpful ways of people and books and all the other forms like meditation and whatever we do. But as you grow older, now you begin to act on your own, and you continue even in difficult times. And you begin afterwards to act fully as a young adult in this practice. So, for example, you learn to clean up after yourself, after the messes you make with language and body, speech, and mind in various ways. We learn to clean up after ourselves at a certain point. And then we also begin to police our own behavior. We begin to note when we're behaving badly and to put a stop to it. So we also have that part. And the work is done mostly in the dark, which means it's done with a very limited understanding of reality that we have at this point. Until then, you work mostly on disciplining body, speech, and mind. And everything is clear, understandable. You do this and this happens. You do that and that happens. And whether or not you're capable, you begin to discipline yourself. At this point, a teacher, and by extension the Sangha, is the most important part of your education in Zen studies. Nothing can replace that for further education in knowledge of oneself. But after 5 years or so, the teacher's presence is necessary, not so much for words and explanations, but to help bring to consciousness all that you have been taking in for the last 5 to 10 years in meditation. A teacher helps to integrate your knowledge in a way that makes it useful. And now a new possibility of work with a teacher comes into being. Also, this is also my experience of it, and other people's experiences of it may be different. It is done by the most generous act a teacher can do for you. The teacher opens his or her heart and lets you in to rummage around and find what is useful and necessary for you. By their good grace, teachers allow you to access their information in a wordless way and use it for your benefit. Here is where a disciplined body, speech, and mind is really necessary. When you first have access to a teacher's understanding, our limited understanding makes everything look good, and we can be deceived by even the flaws of someone who is other than us. So we learn through experience to be patient, respectful, careful, and reserved in what we do, especially with our teacher. We grapple with power, fame, fortune, and grasping of anything that looks interesting. From such struggles, we see more deeply into our own being and understand much of the driving force we are unconscious of until then. Grasping doesn't yield the gains we expect because now we are so close to the teacher and find ourselves being trounced by our own ignorance, made obvious because of the teacher's proximity. We already have a conscience that knows when we make a wrong choice, but we're adept at overlooking that conscience when it's necessary. But up close and personal with a teacher changes that, not with words, but with our own knowledge. We have become like water entering water, one being with the teacher, and we learn to live now with a whopping big conscience that we can't overlook. A teacher is made up of all the good and bad stuff that we're all made up of, but has mastered his or her flaws through dedicated practice and a lifetime of unrelenting discipline of body, speech, and mind. You, however, are just entering the arena, and now that you've anchored your behavior in the precepts and the Eightfold Path and keeping in mind the Four Noble Truths, proceed to face all that the teacher has faced and conquered within his or her life. Your job now is to face all of that as well in order to reach the treasure of Dharma knowledge that resides in the flesh and blood of the teacher. It resides in all of us, unrecognized, but your relationship with the teacher helps you to know it personally as well. With your permission, you are free to wander, you are free to wander in the dark in your own understanding and look at everything through treasures of the lineage of the teachers before us, even though we're limited by how careful we are of our own urges of greed, hate, and delusion and grasping. Your good sense and ability to rise above the self will save you many times over if you keep your thinking mind in control. So once you enter into such an intimate relationship with a teacher, one who is willing to open his or her mind to you, how much time you spend trying to run away when things get tough, or how much time you spend without complaining, or just by enduring your lack of understanding patiently and facing all that comes to you with courage. That makes the difference in whether it's 10 to 20 to 30 years of study through deserts, mountains, swamps, and endless roads of practice. As you ripen like a beautiful fruit, things will change from direct shades of black and white to many soft shades of gray as well, and look very different. 10 to 20 to 30 years comes to mean nothing, and practice and ordinary life instead become nothing special, not even different. That's why a teacher is so important, not just to begin with, but to enter into the stage of wordless learning with trust. You can argue about all the things you don't like about this or that in practice, but eventually you could insert any words in the same spaces and realize they mean nothing in the midst of practice itself. When you work with a teacher at this point, speech is not as important as it was in the beginning. In fact, speech clouds the real happening. So another part of this practice is to develop silence as much as possible, other than for necessary words, and becoming instead like a tiger on the prowl in Zen terms. But if we speak as entertainment, or to fill in uncomfortable spaces, or just to express an emotion, speech can become a detriment to practice and can create disturbing karma. And here is another important reason for a teacher at this point, especially to protect each of us from our own selves. As we discover in our practice, we can be our own worst enemy, and our words and actions can cost us dearly, not to mention how much of a mire thinking can make for us. When such a relationship with a teacher has begun, it isn't possible to keep changing teachers after that, not without negating the practice involved and beginning at what feels like one again. When you have accomplished practice with the full acceptance of your teacher, you return to life as you help bring to consciousness all that you have been taking in. Sorry. I'll read that again. When you have accomplished practice with the full acceptance of your teacher, you return to your life again as you know it, loaded with Dharma treasures, but in totally empty arms. And practice continues, just that you have opportunities of your own choosing. After intense study and acceptance with one's teacher, one can then study with many different teachers to round out your understanding and deepen practice even further. Thank you. Thank you. Here goes Peter. Can you move back?
No, my knees here.
Oh, okay, that's good. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about this or different experiences is also interesting to hear? Chris Richard. Can't hear you, Chris.
Better now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems, almost all pervasive today. Even in the Bible Belt, that these there's this focus. It's that law of attraction, or the abundance gospel and all that. It seems that almost everything that's that gets an American version of itself really gets, almost solipsistic. And I never thought I'd meet, and until like the last 5 years, I never really thought I'd meet people like that, because the current iteration of it is to figure out what immutable properties of yourself could that you're uneasy about, and then transmit it to the entire outward world, judging you, which you would have no idea of. And it's sort of like a process of baby proofing. And I use the word baby both figuratively and literally, because that's what I've seen. It's almost the opposite of stoicism. And I think a little bit, I mean, you have the advantage of studying both here and in Japan, as well as probably a lot of other people from other places and country and other cultures. You've done this for a while, so I would like to know your feelings on is there anything that's unique about American culture that seems to cause this?
Cause the feeling of,
Well, all this, everything becomes, you know, about how to, looking in the mirror and telling yourself you're great at everything, even if you're not,
Mhm.
uh,
Oh, you mean like you deserve this?
yeah, I'm loved. I am,
Like the ads are always saying, is you deserve this, and so
yeah, yeah. They even had like,
I do have opinions about that. I
because I mean, here it's like you almost every other culture, they take care of their parents, their elders. And here it's like you put them in a shipping crate and, um, I think that's part of it. When it's part of the same thing. But I was just wondering, from your advantage, I haven't studied in the East, and it comes from the East. Uh, uh, what do you think the cause is?
my own opinion of it is that we we talk always as if we have wonderful opinions of ourselves, and our self-help books are proof that we can do anything kind of thing. But I think maybe we actually have a kind of lack of self-esteem somehow, and it's always coming through. And I know that when I was in my teens in the 50s, the big thing at that point was housewives would show up on these programs, and somebody would say, and what do you do for a living, or what do you do, and they would answer, oh, I'm just a housewife. And that kind of lack of self-esteem was really big in the 50s among women. And I think men also have the same lack of self-esteem, and it comes through in things like telling ourselves all the time we deserve this, or abundance is good, and etc. And I think it only is trying to fill up a kind of empty hole. And when I was Jisha for Suzuki Roshi back in Tassajara, one time he was talking to several of us sitting around, and somebody was talking about how American children are this or that. And he said, I don't think American children are loved enough. And that one surprised me because I was of the opinion, we have everything and we can do anything, and etc. So to hear that opinion really surprised me, and I started to look because of it and realize that's probably true. And other families take care of their elderly partly because the elderly want that. And it's not
Yeah,
always true among the elderly of our culture that they would like to be independent and not rely on anybody, et cetera, because this self-help feeling is overwhelming in America. And but I think finally everybody wants that. And so that's why the feeling of not doing enough, not being enough, not fulfilling our roles is so strong in this culture.
I at a few times in my life, I've had both male and female managers, and there's one that's always been a dead giveaway. And for the record, my best managers were women, and a couple of the worst ones were, but from both of the worst ones, one tried to tell me when I could use the bathroom. I was working as a TA in a school, but it was just absurd, and I had to draw the line. And I've heard this before, and it's this smug reaction of, you know, I think, not even addressing my situation, but I think a lot of people are really, you know, really insecure when they're faced with a strong woman. And my response was, um, every strong woman, man, every strong person I've ever met has never ever enumerated the fact that they were strong. Strong people don't think that way.
Yeah.
They assume everyone else is going to raise their hand and pitch in, or their expectations of others kind of align with themselves.
Yeah.
Unless there's some super narcissist or something. But it I find that people, it's like a poker tell almost of, what they've got going inside. It's like if a man tried to tell me to go to the bathroom after I think it would be handled a different way, which would probably prevent him from bringing that up. But I've just seen, and it's only gotten worse for some reason. I must have. My children don't suffer from that. And it's. I take it as a sign something went right, you know. But
Well, I had a very strong woman teacher in
yeah,
Japan, Mrs. Chiba, who was super strong. And the one thing I found that was interesting, we studied with both men and women teachers in Japan, and the truth was I couldn't tell any difference between the ways. A good teacher is just a good teacher and
yeah,
does what they think is right and says what they think is right, and they don't hold back. You know, there's none of this, I'm a woman so I don't do this, or I'm a man so I do this, etc. There was none of that ever.
yeah,
And so the only difference with Mrs. Chiba was that occasionally when we'd show up at her house, she would bring out some pork curry to service, and we'd eat, with her or something. But
yeah.
the only difference, other than that, I really didn't find any real difference between good teachers, men or women, and that's what I liked about it.
Yeah. One last thing, and this was on what you said at the beginning about the need to study with a teacher. As you know, I've told you I was studying on my own for 6 or maybe 8 to 10 years actually
Hmm.
before coming, and you look at the chapters titles, right? And oh, I'll put that one off, and you know what I mean. There's things you're going to be interested in just because of whatever,
Yeah.
and you need to kind of be forced, or
Yes.
it needs to be placed in front of you, and you need to deal with it, and you're
Yeah.
gonna play a trick on yourself where you kind of endlessly sequester the things you don't want, and I
That's
found that to be the best part of all this, and
yeah.
of the Sangha as well.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It's with Mrs. Chiba or Kano Sensei, we could not
Yeah,
avoid certain things, and she would not let us avoid them, and we just had to live through them with her. And so it wasn't particularly pleasant, and sometimes there were meltdowns, but it was still important, and I would never ever have changed that part of it, because that's when I realized for the first time you really don't want to go into some dark places, and you really
yeah,
don't want to handle the negative side of your being. You really don't. You want to touch it lightly, and
yeah,
throw us right in the middle of it. And so, yeah, no, there's no way to avoid going through the dark in yourself. There's no way if you want to find your way out to the other light side. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm done.
Thank you. So that's really important. That's why for me a teacher is absolutely necessary, because we aren't strong enough to face our dark side alone. And as I pointed out, the first thing she said to us when we were a long time, we were saying, why do we need a teacher, etc. She said, a teacher protects you from yourself. So yeah.
Jane and I were, we were planning to just stay in Japan for 6 months, and so at about the end, this is not the time sequence is not important here, but let's say we got there in spring, and we met Chiba Sensei in the fall, and at some point we were thinking about going back, and Jane actually wanted to go back, and she asked Chiba Sensei, uh,
Yeah,
can I should we go back? And Chiba Sensei said, who was psychic, by the way. She was a psychic as well. And Chiba Sensei said, if you go back now, you will have 9 years of bad luck.
And that scared the heck out of me. So I had 9 years of not bad luck, but hard luck.
And so 6 months became 22 years.
Wow.
So yeah, the teachers have all kinds of ways, making you face yourself, and a lot of them, whatever it took. For me, psychic was just, like you couldn't question it. So
Yeah.
9 years of bad luck, no. Yeah. So yeah, I think a teacher is really necessary. And Kano is like we had this man and this woman both all the time talking to and relating to all the time, and it was really helpful. Yeah. Who's? I think Sandy was next. Oh no, Joanne is next.
Yeah.
Excuse
Oh,
me.
okay.
Well, when you said about like you observed that maybe people had low self-esteem in the 50s, I'm kind of wondering if we've like the pendulum has swung to the opposite end of the spectrum because I my observation, like working in this job that I just left, it seems like maybe there are people, younger ones, maybe in particular, where they have like this falsely boosted ego because, some of them, they were on their first job or they had maybe a year of experience, a year and a half, maybe at the most. And if something was not done correctly, or if they were like digging too hard, too fast, and we're digging through something that we had to like take a look at and take slowly and evenly, when you would say something, it was like a criticism. I mean, that's just my experience of it. I don't know. It just seems like anything that you would say to correct something that was done out of inexperience was maybe seen as a criticism. And so when Chris talked about some of what he said and what you said about like a lack of self-esteem, it just made me think, well, maybe that is like what has resulted, from the 1950s where, housework was looked at as something that was less than, to now it's like, well, I finished, I was the fourth to finish the finish line, to cross the finish line, and I got a blue ribbon, just like everybody else, or something. I don't know.
I think probably what you're saying, is that the 50s, that lack of self-esteem was coming out in women first, and then it started to show up in men as well. And I think it's just coming out in the open, and it's only out in the open now, really fully. And part of the thing is all the self-help books telling you how to assert yourself and how to deal with this and that and how to be successful, etc. And I think the really strong people I meet has never had that kind of hang up. They just don't care about any of that. And criticism is just another thing to consider. Is it right or is it wrong? Mm-hmm. And nothing more than that. So I think probably it will work itself out, just like everything else in this country right now is working itself out. And hopefully, I think the American people themselves, men and women, are both incredibly resilient and have enormous personal confidence, and it's distorted right now into confused confidence.
Well, yeah, because, well, I mean, I think that that whatever the phenomenon is, I think it's just like a veneer over the same thing, like maybe pervasive poor self-esteem that everybody has. But I could tell myself that I'm okay or even better than somebody else, and hopefully nobody like sees that it's all fakery, but I don't know.
And maybe anyway, Sukaroshi said he didn't. Sukaroshi didn't want us to just copy Japanese Zen. And in the beginning, we had very, very few rituals. But when Tassajara opened up, then another teacher came who was a person who taught those things. And he taught them to us at Tassajara. Jane was the Eno back then, and so he taught her, and then she taught us actually quite often how to do things with the service and all the stuff, and kokyo and stuff like that. That word didn't exist until he came. But anyway, however, it's crazy to think about American Zen. American Zen will be the result of something.
American,
Zen is never nationalistic.
yeah.
It's just not the point at all. There's no nationalism or you know you know love of anything like that in Zen Buddhism.
No, and it'll just change when Americans mature more spiritually,
Well,
what I think.
well, yeah. So, like, you know, what in the maturation of Zen, or like, you know, was being discussed about, like, when he said, you know, children in this country aren't loved. That Suzuki Roshi said. Well, is it maybe
Enough. Aren't
huh,
loved enough is what
loved enough? Well, but what it made me think about is, like, are we not taught to be loving? Is it that, like, because yeah, you can have a parent love you, give you all everything you need, everything you want, but that doesn't mean that you're taught to be loving, like to elders, or to be loving of, you know, the respectful constructive criticism of a teacher like you would get in Zen. That's my last thought.
Okay, let's go on to Sandy.
Oh, okay. Well, I was born in 1947. And my mother and father lived through the war. My father didn't go to war. He stayed home. But my mother, as I grew up, I realized that she had this, it was almost like, I considered almost like a scar that she carried. She lived through so much lack where things weren't available. She said, she told me that she went out, you know, with holes in her shoes, looking for one egg just to be able to feed my sister. And she incorporated that sense of there not being enough, you know, if you don't search for something, if you don't get more. And then as I got older, that had pervaded our lives, you know, although my whole life. I remember I'd ask my mother, you know, I'd say something about I need a birthday present for so-and-so. She had a stock in the linen closet of all these gifts that she had collected. So she'd always have something to give. And the same thing, she always gave me like overwhelming amounts of clothes and things like that. But I always felt that lack of warmth and love sometimes from her. It was replaced by that giving. And I remember one year, my birthday is January 1st, and Hanukkah and Christmas are right before it. I remember getting one giant small mattress box full of gifts on my birthday, and nothing else on any other holiday. And I'd gotten so weird about the way we lived that I equated that with lack of feeling and lack of, you know, love for me, that they would just do one giant thing instead of making it like my friends who might go to temple and they'd get 8 presents, and every day would be something different. So that lack, or that ability to feel like if I don't collect this, or if I see something on sale, I should buy more. Those types of feelings I brought over from the way my parents were. And I see that as, then I see us when we went into, quote, the hippie generation. And it was like negating everything of our parents growing up and our rebellion against that. And even then, you know, I realized how selfish people were. You know, that it's just, it seems like it was our culture that made us become more of this I. The only thing that's important is me and mine, and how much I can collect, And so it's like our view of society after the war, I mean, it changed dramatically. Uh, During the war and before the war, there was that sense of, um, you know, community and people helping each other. But it seems like afterwards, a lot of that fell away and it became self-motivated. So we are different. We are different than Japanese culture who reveres our elders and looks out for each other. And a lot of cultures are like that, but we don't seem to be that way.
Well, not yet anyway, but
No.
I think we're working towards it.
Well, we're trying.
Yeah. Paul.
Okay.
Just a minute, Mark. Mike.
There we go. Okay. I think you were very fortunate, Jane and Peter, to have some quite wonderful teachers. But I don't think we should leave the impression that only people that have halos could be teachers. I think
Sorry if I gave that impression.
it sounded a little bit that way, and I think
can make that right.
I think that sometimes, you know, a real asshole could be a good teacher, because if they're willing to take the time to make you do the things that you avoid doing, to push you in directions that you wouldn't normally go, or to, in some cases, to cut the ground up from underneath you entirely and make you struggle. I mean, that's a teacher needs to be someone that participates with you on a level that pushes you into new areas. They don't have to be unpleasant people, but I know in Japan, the carpentry teacher that taught me the most was really an unpleasant person. But he made me do all, you know, he made me do everything, just like, you know, he would come in and scold me. Even if I was doing the right thing, he would scold me, you know. And then we know some other people that well, you know, you were gone through those years. You didn't have that experience of the Richard Baker experience, but anyway.
Well, actually, we did have some of it. You know, we went to different sessions.
Yeah. Anyway,
the teacher may not have, but the students did.
but you know, even for me, he was a great teacher, because he just beat the shit out of me and made me do things that I would not normally do, or not. It made me be stronger than I could possibly be by myself. So I'm gratefully indebted to that, even though his own personality traits were maybe somewhat lacking. Anyway, teachers are where you find them. I think it's, you know, some people say a sick child is a good teacher. Some people say, you know, that a crippled parent or something. And people finding a teacher is, I think, extremely important, because we have a tendency to just tell ourselves the same story that we tell ourselves all the stories we like, and then avoid all the stories that we need for growth. Anyway, but I think we have to broaden our search for a teacher, not just in those sort of super wonderful people, which nice if you have a teacher like that, but you can learn from a wider number of people.
I agree that's, if I gave that impression of Chiba Sensei, she could be a tough nut, you know, really. And anybody that can throw anybody into their worst behavior and live through it themselves has got to be tough. So my feeling, maybe I just didn't express it well enough, but the point is the teachers we had were could be frightening at times and could be really intimidating at times. But still, looking back, I feel like I was really lucky in them, both of them.
And another thing about children, the tendency in Japan is to treat children under 5 as little gods and goddesses that can do no wrong, and are just indulged and encouraged and everything. And then once they turn 5, they said traditionally, then they beat the hell out of them. They become really strict. You have
I
to do
know.
this, you have to do that.
The-
But until then, they can do no wrong.
Yeah, but the school system and the family system work together to make a very disciplined situation. So
Right.
schools-
The schools are very disciplined.
Yeah,
Okay, Mike.
Mike.
Okay, once again, I'm going to come at this from another direction. When you first talked about a teacher and the role of a teacher versus studying book knowledge and stuff like this, I kept getting an image that like book knowledge is like reading a map. You can read it incorrectly. The information is there, but you need the teacher to be the finger pointing at the moon. And there's no words necessary. Just follow the finger and there you're at. And the reason why I bring this up is when I was a roadie with a band, I had a real bad tendency. I could read a road map very well. And the driver would say, which way do we go? And I would point in one direction and he would drive in the opposite direction and we would get there. And it always worked, except one day I was correct. I pointed in the right direction and we went 150 miles before we realized we were in the wrong direction. We were late for the show. And he says, don't ever do that again. And I drove back. And I find that with my studies, some of you know, I read a lot about Zen and Buddhism and stuff, and I enjoy doing that. But I need a teacher because it's just a roadmap, and I may be reading the roadmap wrong. But I need a teacher to sit there and point to the moon and say, that's where you're going. You know, don't look at my finger, look at the moon. Is that kind of like what you were talking about in the beginning of your talk about a teacher's role?
Yeah, I think the teacher understands what the direction is, and we confuse it very easily by any kind of desires or wants or anything. We confuse the directions easily, and a teacher is there to put you back in. If you're a tough guy, put you back forcefully, and if you're just sitting there quaking in your boots, just shove you over a little bit. Whatever it is, it's just whatever is necessary. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, Paul, one second there. One thing I ever always heard from years back was the best teacher for a drunk is, for a drunk is another drunk.
Maybe so. I have to think about that one.
They understand each other.
They understand each other, and nothing is portrayed as clearly.
Yeah.
Steve.
That's it.
Not yet, Steve.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, one of the things that I've noticed in myself, which I notice in everybody, is we like to blanket things, and our personal experience with something all of a sudden becomes everything out there. And, I grew up in the time of shame, or I shouldn't even say that. In my house, shame seemed to be the thing to get you to do something or not do something. And what I'm hearing about Americans and stuff, I don't know a lot of people. I know a few people, and I have my bias that I grew up with. And to blanket everybody, right now, me and my wife are taking care of my mother-in-law, an elderly person. So yes, do some people get put away in a home? Do some, and so to say that that's American, no, that's individuals that make choices that we either agree or we don't agree with. And it's helped me a lot in whenever I'm trying to get my point of view across about something. Am I blanketing this whole thing? Blanket laws have put more people in prison than need to be in prison. Blanket things to say this is the general thing is, to me, kind of, no, it's not general. Each individual has their individual thing. American, Japanese, whatever you were brought up into, that's the whole battle, is fighting what I've somehow created in my mind through my childhood and on up, that No. And so I get to see my points of views are really mute because I only have a limited point of view, period. So I don't know if I'm on the right track here, but I think I am. And so therefore I am.
Thank you, Steve. That's well put about blanketing things. Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. Chris.
Just a thought I wanted to share. And, you know, this definitely ties into experience somewhat, sort of. Um, okay. One of the metaphors I've heard Brad Warner share is that Zazen is sort of like brushing your teeth. Like, if you're doing it every day, you don't necessarily notice the benefits, but you might go a few days without it, and then you're kind of like, I don't feel so great. And then you brush your teeth again, you're like, this is much better. So I kind of feel like having a teacher can be rolled into that metaphor somehow, because when you have a teacher and you keep studying with a teacher, you don't necessarily see the benefits. Well, you probably do here and there. But my point is that when you look at someone who's kind of like making their own way and they don't have a teacher, you can be like, ugh, I don't know. I feel like that person could probably use a teacher. But if you were to ask me, all right, well, unpack that. What exactly do you think is going on? I don't know that I'd be able to say anything that's really, reflective of reality. It's good to have someone to be accountable to. It's good to have someone who's been there, whatever that might mean, who can say, oh, yes, well, when I got to where you are right now, blah, blah, blah. How much of that jives with your experience of being a teacher? Oh, yeah, no, this is a good question. All right. So you've had a teacher, and now you guys are teachers. How much have you learned about the importance of people studying with teachers since becoming teachers yourselves?
Well, I think it's more obvious, as you say, when you can see someone who's working with someone and you can see their changing demeanor throughout years, you understand that it's important and it really does help. And when I meet someone who tells me they've been studying for like 10 or 15 years and they're confused about this or that, then you realize, okay, well, maybe it took them 10 or 15 years to get to that point. And then you can start to work with somebody. So everybody's different in this. Everybody comes at teachers in a different way, and some come after 20 years of practice on their own. Some come and then they're all primed in a certain way, and they meet somebody who changes everything and turns it upside down. And then we really learn when things are turned upside down. But I think it's not something anybody can do on their own. It seems like it should be, but it isn't, because of the very fact that we avoid the worst in ourselves, because it really is hard to face something we don't want to see. So for me, being a teacher is just like waiting for somebody to be ready. It's not so much that we're in here saying, do this, do that. Oh, this person's ready now. It's just you wait. It's like being a spider in a web. You do nothing except sit and wait and hope one of the students will finally get stuck in the web and you can say, there, let me show you this about this now. So mostly for me, being a teacher is waiting for the right moment. And it's not so much trying to do anything with anybody as just recognizing. It's like when you recognize when a fruit turns a certain color, it's ready to be, wrapped in paper or something so that the bugs don't get it, or sprayed or something. So it's just like recognizing that there comes a time when that fruit needs to be protected, and then it can go on to its own full fruitness.
I would say we are teachers and we are students, and we go on that way. And so getting involved with being a good teacher, you do what you can. You just do you just do yourself, and that's it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, well, it may not work then. But it really, thinking about being a teacher is a kind of an ego thing. It really is, not important. We have all kinds of roles in life, and one of ours now is teachers. You don't have that particular role, but your humanness is what's important. not whether you're a teacher or a student. And of course, as Sugiroshi said, if I didn't have to study, if I didn't have students, I probably wouldn't study. Quite true. It's quite true. A teacher studies because the students need him to say something to them, and they don't know what to say, so they study. But when they study, they find out what they want to say. So it may not be what you're studying at all, but it's very important to study. So Sugiroshi and Katagiri Sensei studied all the time apparently. So that's so. If you're a teacher, then you have to become a better student.
Didn't he also say, I can be a good teacher because the student is a good student?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they go together. Yeah.
A teacher pats you on the back, or a teacher slaps your wrist. That's it.
Or swings at you, or beats the.
Listen, I have Chris. Do you have anything else to say? But time is done.
I was just about to say thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you.